everyone. Welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. Hardeep Singh Nijjar, Canadian Sikh, was killed outside a temple in Surrey, British Columbia in Canada on 18th of June. And Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Ottawa has credible intelligence linking Indian agents to the murder of Hardeep Singh. He has also said that we are there to constructively engage with India, and we also hope that India would do the same. And he has also said that Canada has shared credible allegations regarding this matter with India. On the other side, what we have seen from Indian side, a reaction saying they have already rejected these startling revelations by Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, saying these allegations are absurd and politically motivated, with the spokesperson of its Ministry of External Affairs saying that no such evidence of allegations have been shared with India. We've also seen the United States urging India to cooperate with Canada to ensure the accountability. Earlier, we saw India had asked a senior Canadian diplomat to leave the country after Canada expelled the Indian diplomat regarding this particular matter. In today's program, we are going to talk about, after these startling revelations by Canadian Prime Minister, what a sort of likely response and reaction by the Western nations collectively is expected regarding this particular matter. Also, what course the diplomatic and economic relations of these major Western countries will take with India in future, and also what does the international law specifically say about it. To discuss all that, we are honored to have been joined in the studio by Dr. Afsah Qazi. She's expert international relations. Dr. Afsah, thank you very much for taking time out for Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. On Skype, we are honored to have been joined by Lieutenant General retired Raza Muhammad Khan, former president of the National Defense University. General Raza, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. Dr. Afsah, if you allow me, let me begin the discussion with General Raza. General Raza, first of all, after this particular startling revelation by Justin Trudeau, now specifically talking about Pakistan's perspective, Pakistan continuously and repeatedly had been intimating and drawing the attention of the international community about India's state sponsorship of terrorism. Pakistan's stance vindicated by these revelations by the leader of a Western country. Your take regarding this, sir?
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think first of all, we, the Canadian government and other countries where Sikh diaspora is in a sizable number, they need to remember that this is election year in India. And the present BJP government has already lost, in 6 state elections. And I think they are in the habit of these kinds of state-sponsored terrorist acts to gain political advantage. They did it in 2019 when they stage managed an attack on their own forces in Pulwama, conveniently blamed Pakistan for that, and attacked us in Balakot. And of course, so on and so forth. Whenever India is in some kind of internal crisis or financial crisis, that they either target the Indian Muslims, other minorities in India, Kashmiris, or put the blame on Pakistan. So I think that's the bigger perspective, the motive, in my view, which everybody needs to understand. Having said that, I think we need to see this particular issue in its deep-rooted historical perspective. You see, just during the partition, Sikhs were a party, in addition to Hindus and Muslims for the partition. And while the Congress considered them as a faction of Hindus, that was not the case. And they actually demanded independence for themselves at that time, particularly, in the portion of Punjab, Indian Punjab now, where they were in numbers. And Nehru actually promised them their own state, semi-independent state, if they would support the Congress. But I think they, on the contrary, they actually believed him, and that promise was never fulfilled, like the promise made by Nehru to the Kashmiris till 1966, when Haryana was divided and it was separated from Punjab. But the present Indian Punjab state was declared a state for the Sikhs, and Sikhs was happy with that for some time. But then in 1984, when they asked for more autonomy, Operation Blue Star was launched, and the Akal Takht was destroyed by the Indian Army, which was the most sacred place for them. And I think it could be compared to like Mecca for us or the Vatican for the Christians. And I think more than 1,000 pilgrims were killed uh, in the Akal Takht in Amritsar. And you are also aware that to take a revenge for that, and Indira Gandhi was assassinated, and after that, she was assassinated, I think, in October, and during the month of October, about 3,000 Sikhs were murdered by Hindu mobs in Delhi, and another 10,000 in about 40 cities of India. So I think thereafter, their demand for a separate state continues. And I think for India to close its eyes to this demand, which is now become an international demand. And as the Sikhs for Justice, they have issued a map for Khalistan, and the Sikh diaspora in many countries of the world, particularly in Canada, in the UK, and in the US, they're actually they've started a peaceful struggle for their independence. And whatever now has happened in Canada, I think it is very deplorable. That is an extension of India's state-sponsored terrorism, about which I think Pakistan is well aware, and we have been telling the world about it. And I think now is the time that they believe us, and now is the
Right.
time for them to punish India for whatever they have done.
Right. What could be the possibilities in that particular regard? I'll come back to you, General Raza, for your detailed understanding regarding that aspect. Also, let me bring in Dr. Afsah also into the discussion. Dr. Afsah, the same question to you. Vindication of Pakistan's long-held stance regarding India's state sponsorship of terrorism. Now, these startling revelations coming from the leader of a Western country. How do you look at the entire scenario?
I think yes, just as you've mentioned, this is a vindication for Pakistan's long-held stance, and it's not only a stance, but this has been the truth, that we have been telling the world that India is not as much into the fair play as the West believes it to be, only because there are certain vital interests associated with India, and India has been their much sought after ally for quite long, especially since they have been on this track to contain China. So yes, it has been a vindication of Pakistan's stance, and now this actually shows that what happens when you don't call a spade in time, and timely, when you don't take a reaction, or when you don't react to the reality, and only when it gets to your own homeland, then you realize that yes, actually this is a harsh reality that we have to deal with. And this actually somehow reinforces what many of the strategic experts and scholars have been saying, that the US or the West and the India alliance is more about the complementarity of interests rather than complementarity of values. So they do not have much in common, and this is actually very much evident when we look at the how the UN and UN based organizations and the international covenants have been evaluating India's performance regarding certain human rights. As far as Pakistan's response is concerned, I think the response from our Foreign Office has been quite strategic. We have very rightly put it into wording, and we have told the world that back in December 2022, we did give a dossier containing very irrefutable, quite an irrefutable evidence regarding India's involvement in certain activities or acts of terrorism inside Pakistan, but nobody paid a heed to it at that time. So now it has come in a full-blown moment.
Finally, that particular moment in history has come for the Western nations to realize, towards which Pakistan had repeatedly been drawing their attention to, right?
Yes, this could be that particular moment. This could be that critical juncture. But and I think this critical juncture could actually become more critical by the way that India has responded to it. If an ally is asking you to play a role or have a fair play in an inquiry being committed against a crime that they suspect, and if you have such long strategic ties, then it would not have been much of a problem for India. If it had claims of being a valuable democracy, being truthful, and had they been having some ground to it, then India would not be having a problem in complying or cooperating, at least in the investigation part. But the way and the dramatic way or the extreme way India has responded to it, it has, I think, it might turn the tables. I think it's too early to say if the West would ultimately realize, because we do know that there are vested interests which are associated with India. It might not be, even if it is not that critical juncture where they do realize that how difficult India could be to manage at times or in times of need, but they would definitely realize that they have to be more tactful in dealing with India. And I also think that they already know this, but this is the first instance that they have seen a evidence or a proof that what India is capable of doing.
So expecting the envoy from Canada, the action the Canadian government has taken regarding this matter, then a tit for tat move by the Indian side. How do you look at that?
So I think this is the usual course of diplomatic interaction. Once there's a stiffness in the ties, and of course there's an increasing degree of things that happen when there's a diplomatic crisis going on. So ultimately we need to understand that Canada is a part of North America, and India has more to lose than Canada if it comes to a diplomatic crisis or a diplomatic rift between the two. There are more than 3 lakh Indian students who are studying on Canadian scholarships and in Canada, plus there are more than 7 lakh Sikhs who are residing in Canada.
So when we talk about the investigation regarding the matter, right, the Canadian government has asked India to cooperate. The Prime Minister saying that we hope that they will cooperate, as we have shared with them the allegations, the evidence regarding that. We have also seen the voice coming from the United States urging India to cooperate to ensure accountability. In a scenario where India doesn't cooperate in this particular matter with Canada, what sort of likely reaction do you expect coming from the United States side, given the fact its interests associated with India?
I cannot exactly say what would be the response, but I can surely say that what the response should be like, because it has something to do with the larger rules-based order that the US keeps talking about, and the US and its allies have been working towards it, and they have been evolving a number of new frameworks. For instance, this entire concept of integrated deterrence. So once there is, if this actually this exposes the weakness of the concept of integrated deterrence, that where the allies are not on the same page even regarding one simple investigation related to a terrorist incident. So I think the response has to be tough. It would probably include certain sanctions. Of course, it might not lead to a very big rift or a very
right.
big, yeah.
Dr. Afsah, I'll have to take a very quick break over here. After this,
Sure.
we'll resume the discussion from here. It's time for a short break. I will continue the discussion after this. For that, stay tuned. Welcome back to Views on News. In today's program, we are discussing the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, Canadian Sikh, and the involvement of Indian agencies in this particular murder, as shared by Canadian Prime Minister Mr. Justin Trudeau. We are joined for the discussion in today's show by Dr. Afsah Qazi, expert in international relations, and on Skype we are joined by Lieutenant General Retired Raza Mohammad Khan, former President of the National Defence University. General Raza, in earlier take, you mentioned that India resorts to some acts like that for the political point scoring, as the election year in India is pretty much around the corner. So if India resorts to such type of tactics just before the general elections are about to happen, but at the cost of what? At the cost of, without any consideration to the cost of their relationship with the Western nations, the bilateral relationship with Canada, with the US and other Western nations in particular?
Well, I think that's
Unfortunately, there's
a nuclear.
General Raza, can you hear me, please?
Okay, so they risked almost, a nuclear war with Pakistan. In fact, in the subcontinent, but they were actually prepared to accept those consequences so that they can win the elections. Similarly, if you recall, just before the elections, then he said that he was the chowkidar of India, and he wanted to pick to his vote bank that he's really the only strong man India can actually deal with terrorists. But the entire world then found out that there were no terrorists in Balakot, and in the process, they lost two of their aircrafts, and we captured one of the pilots, and they were thoroughly embarrassed. I think by also claiming that they had shot down PF aircraft, which was again a lie, and it was proved repeatedly that they were lying for that purpose. So right now, again, if we are talking of the Indian position politically, then I think the response of other NATO countries has been really lukewarm. They have not openly condemned India, despite the overwhelming evidence that has been presented by the intelligence agencies of the five major countries. And the only reason for that is that they think that India is a bulwark against China in the Asia Pacific rim. And secondly, that Indian economy is too big, to annoy their leader, even if it is at the cost of the murder of a NATO citizen, NATO country citizen, which is Canada. So that is, I think, very sad. But I think only time will tell what is going to be the ultimate outcome.
Right, General Raza, you just mentioned that the reaction from the other NATO members on this particular incident has been largely lukewarm. Now, you also mentioned, we all know that it was the killing of a citizen of a NATO member country. So specifically when we talk about the responsibility of other NATO members, if such type of thing happens to one member state, the killing on its soil, which is of course a breach of sovereignty, as earlier talked about by Mr. Justin Trudeau, do you think it invokes the relevant sections or the articles or the provisions of the treaty among the NATO members regarding collective action or reaction if such type of action takes place against one of their members?
I think so, but I think post the event of that murder, whatever has been happening in the Indian media and in the Indian parliament is something of greater concern, I think, to the whole world and to NATO countries and to Pakistan, where one of the politicians in the Indian Parliament made a mention of undertaking surgical strikes, if need be, again in Canada. And I believe on the Indian media, in a live debate uh, which was televised in India, one of the major television channel, an Indian politician, not of a high but of a medium stature, uh, was blatantly, he hurled threats at Canada by saying that India should send its nuclear submarine and if needed, to nuke Canada. So that actually shows how irresponsible some of the Indian leadership is when they can talk publicly, to their own nations about the use of nuclear weapons. Again, it actually it proves what Pakistan has been saying that the Indian nuclear weapons and their strategic weapon systems, including their missiles, they've already fallen into the wrong hands of the Hindutva followers. And I think they need to be more worried about that. And I think NATO needs to take these threats rather seriously. And again, I think other countries where the supporters of Khalistan are there, which includes Australia, and which includes Italy, the United States, I think that they also needs to be concerned. Let me very quickly tell you that there was an Indian citizen by the name of this Vishal Youth who was booted out from Australia because he was attacking the Khalistan supporters there, and he was actually also accused of other heinous crimes. But very lately, when he arrived back in India, he was given a hero's welcome. So these are some of the incidents I think which the international community needs to take a very serious note of, and these may even be worthy of a note by the UN Security Council and the UN Secretary General.
Right, General Raza, that is exactly what the caretaker Prime Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Anwarul Haqqaqar, on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly session is also try to draw international community's attention to how bigger a threat Hindutva poses to global peace and security. Let me bring in another participant in the show, Mr. Asif Mahmood, senior journalist, joining us on the phone line. Mr. Asif, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. You would have definitely heard General Raza pointing out certain figures from within India after this particular diplomatic row between Canada and India. Threatening Canada of nuking Canada or using surgical strikes, even going to an extent calling Mr. Justin Trudeau as a terrorist. So when specifically we talk about the role of Indian mainstream media, how do you look at this? Are they behaving responsibly regarding the matter?
Thank you very much. India has never behaved responsibly. What to talk about just for now. My point is that if this is the case of Canada, being 1,000 miles away, just imagine what it would be to live beside India, this neighborhood. This is not Hindutva. This is Moditva, and Moditva is stinking, and this is the worst kind of fascism. So I think Canada has all the wherewithal and acumen to deal with India. What Pakistan is supposed to do, we should address the world community that this is the worst kind of terrorism Pakistan has been facing for decades. And this is not an easy or any pleasant thing to live in India's neighborhood. So this is the right time to maximize our opportunities and expose India on the international fronts. India is not just doing this in Canada. Who knows what India has done and what India is doing and what India can do in Pakistan.
Right. So what sort of a course do you foresee when we talk about the Western countries' relations when it comes to diplomatic as well as economic relations, if economic interests are associated with India, which is termed largely as a big economy? How do you see future course of action of the Western countries when it comes to particularly economics with India?
That is not denying that India has an economic clout, but it doesn't mean that Indian economic clout should be given a free hand to illustrate the peace of the world. I mean, Canada is having credible evidence linking Indian agents to the murder of 6 separate leaders. The intelligence is gained by 5 eyes. This is not only Justin Trudeau is saying something. This is not an opinion in isolation by the Canadian government. The Canadian government, by the way, has no hostility towards India. Why should Canada come out with such an allegation? This intelligence is gained by 5 eyes. 5 eyes being Australia, Canada, New Zealand, UK, US. If the intelligence is shared by the United States, I don't think that Western powers shall close their eyes just to appease India for the economic clout of India.
So how, Mr. Asif, how ideally should they be reacting to the matter of such a grave concern?
Instead, matter it should be left over to Canada to deal with. What Pakistan is supposed to do, Pakistan should maximize this opportunity. What India is doing in India, what India is doing with Kashmiris, what India is doing with Pakistan. Modi is not only threat to the Muslims in India, he's threat to the whole South Asia. And moreover, he's not only a threat for the South Asia, he's now a threat for the world peace.
Right. Thank you very much for being with us on the show, Mr. Asif Mahmood, senior journalist. Really appreciate that. Dr. Afsah, now specifically when we talk about the collective defense of the NATO members, do you think the relevant provisions of the NATO treaty are invoked after this incident? Or should be invoked?
I think first of all, so far, this has been a matter that requires investigation, and this is what the Canadian Prime Minister has said in the first place, that we have found evidence quite credible and we would like to investigate it further and to finally see if India is responsible for that. So now if that happens, and if Canada being a NATO member and NATO being a collective security organization which says that an attack on one of the NATO members would be considered an attack on all of the NATO members. So yes, of course it does qualify for a collective response. What kind of a response would that be? That of course the degree or the intensity of the response would be decided on the basis of how intense is the threat posed by India to the NATO members. So just when you were asking the same question to the two other panelists, I was thinking that how best should the NATO members or the West respond. So the simplest answer is they should respond in the way just as they respond to other states like Iran doing something, or states like Russia doing something like that, right? So the best and the easiest or the least intense response could be a very strong diplomatic or a diplomatic consensus or a consensual response at a diplomatic level, plus sanctioning of certain individuals. Even if you do not want to limit your diplomatic ties and your engagement with India because it is a very sought after ally in the Asia Pacific region, or the Indo-Pacific as the US calls it. So at least there should be sanctioning of certain individuals, there should be a ban on certain activities, provided that India has been in violation of its international commitments when it comes to international human rights regime, and the West very well knows it, and the reviews of Indian performance have not been very satisfactory. When it comes to the right of freedom of speech and right of association, and even when it comes to the rights of refugees, migrants, women and children, India has not been performing really well, especially when taken in the context of International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which India is a state party to. But it does not comply with many of the recommendations that the review committees suggest to it. So I think there should be at least this, even if it's not a response based on use of force, it has to be a very clear political and diplomatic move. Also, I would like to add a very significant aspect here, that India behaving the way it has behaved over the matter, it actually refutes the entire diplomatic peace argument, right? Diplomatic peace theory, it says that democracies do not go to war with each other because they have a habit of talking to each other. And here we see that India really does not want to talk, and this tells that how flawed a democracy India is. So therefore, it puts to test and it also refutes the entire diplomatic
Whenever
peace
they
argument.
got red-handed involved in resorting to such type of false flag operations in case of Pakistan, and whenever Pakistan urges them to come to the negotiating table, they refuse to talk with Pakistan. And now this time, the evidence coming from Canada, they are also refusing to talk with them also. Now, specifically talking about the position of the US. Now, we have seen for 4 consecutive years, the US Commission for International Religious Freedom has been urging the US State Department to enlist India as a country of a particular concern, despite 4 years of urgency that this particular commission has shown towards India. The State Department hasn't included India into that particular list. So by looking at this very pattern or the trend by the State Department, do you think it's going to think about sanctioning India regarding the matter which is related to Canada?
I think we need to think a bit more critically and deeply about it. There are 2 things. We see that US has been knowing all along. Okay, the first thing that the US has come to fore and in saying that we have provided them and with the intelligence, and we have been in constant communication with Canadians over the matter, and we have provided them the information. So this essentially means that the evidence must be quite credible, which has allowed the Canadians to come out in public and actually say that India seems to be involved. Secondly, this also has something to say about probably how US puts forward its own interests via its allies. The State Department would itself not sanction India, but now that there has been a case in Canada, so it tries to bring India to task there, and it wants Canadian government to be the one which takes action. Right. So this also tells us something larger about how the US alliance system functions, that US, because it and since it is actually the anchor point for India in the Western alliance system, because it's the strategic engagement with the US that brings India into their sphere of the game. So therefore, the pattern suggests that US has been reluctant in sanctioning India and in putting it on some grey list or on blacklist.
What I understand from it is it wants Canada to act at its own.
It does not want Canada to act at its own.
We don't see much of cooperation or concrete cooperation coming from the US side to Canada.
US wants Canada to do the tasks that it cannot itself do. This is how I see it. Right. So because it's an ally, and US wants to keep engaging with India, and it does not want to get its hands dirty with this task, so it has just provided information, and then it can justify that provision of information under the intelligence agreement, that the Five Eyes intelligence agreement that exists between 5 countries of the Western alliance system. So it can simply say, okay, we were not the one sanctioning you, you did something with the Canadians, and how Canada has responded is within the sovereign domain of Canada being a sovereign country, and it was something that happened within the Canadian jurisdiction. So we really had not much to say. Yes, the West can condemn India in words, but of course it might not take any political move.
Let me go to General Raza. General Raza, in a scenario where the Indian side doesn't cooperate with the Canadian side in future regarding this matter, we don't see much of concrete support coming from other NATO members towards Canada, including the United States also. So what sort of options do you think would be left at the hands of the Canadian authorities in order to pursue this particular case? Do you think it could be pursued at the International Court of Justice? And would Canada be able to get justice from there?
Well, I think Canada will now be formulating various options if the Indian authorities refuse to cooperate with them, as they have been refusing Pakistan constantly, whenever they blamed us for certain actions there for whatever happens in India. But I think we need to be more worried about now the blowback of what India is doing in Indian Punjab, like the confiscation of the properties of many Sikh leaders, and including some innocent people. When there is a reaction to that, and that reaction could be violent inside Indian Punjab. So probably, it could be stage management now once again for blaming Pakistan to hide, their plans for winning a third term in the elections, or to depict themselves as the strongmen uh, of India. So again, if Pakistan is blamed, I think we need to be looking at what our options would be. That is important. Secondly, I'd like to quote, one of the Indian uh, parliamentarian, parliamentarian, only last year. His name was, his name is Sukhpal Singh Khaira, and he was an MLA in the Punjab Assembly. He was the leader of the opposition, and I want to quote him. And he said, Sikh referendum 2020 is a result of consistent policy of bias, discrimination, and persecution towards Sikhs by successive Indian governments. So I think that is what the world needs to know before India could blame Pakistan, in for whatever happens now as a consequence of what they are doing inside India. Not only that, uh, I think whatever India is doing uh, against the Sikhs in India or the Dalits or the Kashmiris or others, I think we have been saying that there is a big question mark on the secular face of India. The world needs to pay attention to that. And I think the uh, uh, the minorities of India, if they combine, I think they're in a very large number, and I'm talking of the Dalits who are over 200 million, 250 million. Similarly, the Muslims are about 200 millions. And if the Sikhs and the Christians also combine, I think they can uh, make an attempt to beat the BJP in the next elections, because in that lies their salvation. And I think the Indian opposition parties should be actually looking at such kind of options to critically bring down the present government, which is actually endangering the entire South Asian subcontinent and beyond, uh, so that they can perpetuate their own rule.
Right, General Raza, there is already an alliance that has been formed by around 24 to 26 political parties, the opposition parties, to contest elections with the aim of defeating the Bharatiya Janata Party led by Congress. Do you think they stand a chance? Because we have seen in the recent legislative elections also, most particularly when we talk about Karnataka, Congress defeated Bharatiya Janata Party over there with a landslide victory. Do you see any sort of a chance by this particular alliance of opposition parties in the upcoming general elections in India?
Look, there is definitely that possibility, but this is also, it is known to the BJP leadership, and that is exactly the reason why they are undertaking such desperate actions against the Sikhs, against the Kashmiris, against Pakistan and others, to for the purpose of votes. And the Indian the Hindutva voters there, they are actually deceived by the BJP party because of these reasons. They are not voting for Modi because he has brought some major changes or developments in India in the financial sector. But it is for these very reasons uh, that they actually vote for him, and like construction of Babri Mosque on the site of construction of a Hindu temple on the site of Babri Mosque, and sending a mission to to the sun and to the moon. These are the kinds of tricks which they are already using for getting more votes. So I think that should be realized by the media and the people of India. What is the reality? What actually advantages have they gained from the BJP rule, and what will happen if they vote for it once again?
Right, Raza, you already mentioned that Pakistan should be mindful of the kind of tactics India might resort to, some sort of a false flag operation and pointing fingers towards Pakistan. Now, the question arises that after this particular episode, whatever happened in Canada, do you think even India resorts to any false flag operation of that sort and put allegation on Pakistan? The international community is going to buy that argument, especially in the wake of this particular incident of Canada?
Pulwama too, as some of the Indian, politicians and academicians, they have been actually very openly saying. I think there was one such televised show only last month. If there is this Pulwama too, then of course India is likely to do it to get more votes. But I think this time there will be two factors which might deter them from not undertaking this, in my view. And one is, the result or the response of Pakistan to their attack on Balakot, which the whole world saw and the Indian leadership also saw. And the second one now is because the world probably uh, will will now be a little more aware of why India has done such actions, reckless actions in the past against Pakistan or Canada or elsewhere, or why it can do it again. And maybe, better sense will prevail, and they may not repeat what they did in 2019.
Right, your point is taken, General Raza. Let me proceed to Dr. Afsah. Dr. Afsah, unfortunately, we're short of time. Two questions together, very short comments regarding any option for India going to ICJ if support from the other NATO members of the US doesn't come and India doesn't cooperate in future. Secondly, do you see the all parties alliance known as India, around 26 political parties formed to defeat BJP in the upcoming elections, do they stand any chance
against Modi? Okay, so coming to the first question, if Canada would, rely on going to International Court of Justice in future, if the US and other NATO members do not cooperate, Canada might take that route, but the important thing is that even if it goes, it will be, of course, it will be in Canada's favor. The ICJ would not give a decision probably against Canada because it's if India is proven to be guilty, if
so
India
what about
is involved.
the matter of jurisdiction?
Yeah, I am coming to that.
The concern coming from India also.
The concern coming from India regarding we need to understand on what grounds is India claiming jurisdiction. India is probably claiming jurisdiction over the victim himself, right? That India thought that he's a terrorist and he needed to be handed over to India. So the point is that that he was already a Canadian citizen, and India's India Citizenship Act, it does not it does not allow dual citizenship. So once he was already a Canadian citizen, it means he is no longer an Indian citizen. So how, on what grounds is India claiming jurisdiction over Mr. Hardeep Singh? And secondly, it is a violation of Canada's jurisdiction on various accounts. We have multiple principles that guide criminal jurisdiction. There's a territorial principle of jurisdiction, and there's a nationality principle of jurisdiction. Then there is a protective principle and universal principle. So clearly on the two grounds of nationality and territorial principle of jurisdiction, India does not stand a ground. It's a violation of Canadian jurisdiction, be it in territorial or in nationality terms. When it comes to the protective principle, India can claim that, on protective principle, we wanted Mr. This victim, and we were chasing him because he was somehow trying to engage in activities which could sabotage the Indian government or Indian state. But then that has to be proven, right? And then if that would be granted, it means that all the Sikhs who are residing as diaspora, they need to be persecuted as well. So India has a very weak ground for standing a decision in its favor if it goes to ICJ or if Canada goes to ICJ. But I think Canadian government would be in a better position to deal with India itself.
Right.
Yeah. And coming to the second question, the alliance of these
perhaps
all.
for some other show.
Yeah,
we'll
sure.
definitely invite you to take your detailed view regarding that. Unfortunately, we're short of time. I have to end the show over here. Dr. Afsah Qazi, expert in international relations. Thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. And Lieutenant General retired Raza Mohammed Khan, former president of the National Defense University. General Raza, thank you very much for being with us once again and for your insightful input regarding this particular matter of grave concern. With that, we come to the end of today's show. Till the next one, take care of yourselves.